Now folks, I've just finished this off for them here, and this is 13J North-South Interconnector, the options. And we're looking at the options in light of the recent case, and there has been earlier case laws which confirm that is correct. Now if you go in against the pylons, you'll be told you're out of time. But the case law of the European Court of Justice, and particularly Court case C-24/19, says that if the thing is there in breach of EU law, you can only leave it there as long as it's necessary to get it fixed. Either do the SCA or take it down. The bit about them stuck for electricity in the meantime doesn't apply here. That's where you have maybe a big power station and it's built in contravention of the law, or some regulation or circular or order was invalid. It didn't have the SCA. You can continue on a while till you get it sorted. That doesn't apply for the North-South Interconnector, and it doesn't apply for wind farms because it's not built. There's no lights going to go out if you don't have it, because the lights are already on here, and they can't come back and say that the windmills are necessary, because when there's a calm day there's no power. So you go into the High Court for leave and the judge will probably refuse you, saying you're out of time, or you might meet a good judge. It doesn't matter. You're going to the Supreme Court anyway, because the thing is going to come under Section 160 of the Planning and Development Act. You can show that they're building this, and the court will be sympathetic because there's nothing built yet. When I go in on the wind farms, I'll have to have a bit more case law. They'll not want to grant it. Moreover, I don't think, and I'll check this for you for another video, Section 50B of the Planning and Development Act applies. Section 50B, I'll have to check that now, only applies where you have a judicial review. This is not a judicial review. This is an application of the Planning and Development Act. So if you lose your own lawyers and you'll have to pay the cost of the other side. That's a bit much to say, but that could happen. That could happen. Now I believe NEP at some stages had 2 millions, but that could happen. Now in NEP's case, they mixed Irish law and planning law with EU law, and the High Court in Dublin ruled that they had to pay the cost of the other side, and they appealed to the court, and I looked to see what happened. I know what the Advocate General said was that because there's an EIA in there, there's European law, you shouldn't charge them anything. We'll see what that happened, but we can look at that at another stage. So anyway, the point is there's a time limit, but if the projects are in breach of EU law, they have to come down. Now, we have a situation with the Derry Brine wind farm built in 2004 where they didn't assess the effects of the turf and the peat falling down off the mountain and doing all that damage, and the European Commission has tackled Ireland and it's fined it €5 million last year, plus 15,000 for every day that wind farm continues. Why isn't it taken down? Well, the answer is nobody challenged it. If somebody went in and applied to have it taken down and took the risks, you might win. You'd have a very interesting situation. But this is slightly different for the pilots, that there's still a few weeks before the start, and even if they do start, there'll be 2 years building it. So there'll not be there's a bit of time to get that going. So what should be done? You need lawyers. I can tell you privately who the only lawyers I believe is fit for this are. I could do it myself. It's too big. I have too many other fish to fry. And while I have great time for some of the people involved and my own neighbours here around Cavan, the best in the world in that part of it, but there's other people who aren't like that. There's other people who would surround you with windmills and want the pylons put underground. And some of the people in Monaghan, and there were some grand people down there, but there's some of them shunned me, didn't want to know anyway. And they won't put even a penny on the line. So they're not going to invest nothing. The only place there'd be money collected would be Meath. But don't forget, if they were doing it in Meath, Cavan would throw in a bit. I think Cavan gave 15,000 to NIP the last time. And Monaghan gave something the same, maybe more. I think maybe up to 50,000. But split up anyway. But you'd have to form a group unless NEP was prepared to come on, and I don't think NEP will come on. I wouldn't, at this stage, I wouldn't think they'd get the best barristers. I don't have confidence in them. I don't care whether they like me or not, they can do what they like. Sue me if they want to. Let's have it on. Let's bring it on. But the point about it is that if there was a group set up in Meath and there was an appetite for this, and get the advice and look at it and talk to the lawyers at least, it wouldn't cost too much. Lawyers are cheap sitting and dear standing. And then you could go to collect. You probably need 12,000 to get leave. And if it's going to the Supreme Court, you probably need 30,000 to get leave. You have to get leave. They have a standing, but you have to get leave. And then you're in, and then they will throw the kitchen sink at you. But we will have cases on the wind farm probably before that in which the kitchen sink will be thrown, and we will be making the law maybe in that regard. The question is, the European Court of Justice has ruled that if something like the connector is built in contravention of EU law and there is no SEA. Now remember, it's the national court that would decide whether there's an SEA. So before you'd ever head to Europe, you'd have to get probably the Supreme Court on the basis that there wasn't the proper public consultation, the proper notification and all of that, and the proper assessment. And there's no assessment for wind farm anyway. Wind farms, they admitted that in my case. So you'd get the Supreme Court to rule, yeah, there wasn't proper public consultation. If they don't do that, you needn't be going to the European Court of Justice, because the European Court of Justice will rely on the local national court to decide if there was an SEA or not. Personally, I can't see in the present atmosphere how the Supreme Court would reject that argument. I mean, there was no public consultation. I was wide alert to this in 2010 and 11 when this was going on, and I didn't know what they wanted or what they were doing or anything else. There wasn't the proper notification, although they did send me out information about they were doing things, but they didn't call it a strategic environmental assessment in the proper sense. It has to be written strategic environmental assessment. That has to be on it. They didn't notify it. And the fact is, when people got to know what they were up to with the grid south, there was 35,000 submissions. I think the fact that there was only 3 submissions to both is enough. I think that's enough to prove there was no proper public consultation. Sure, wouldn't everyone in Monaghan and Cavan and Meath put in something on it? They all put in. There was an awful lot of submissions. It was 1,800 for the South Interconnector. But people may not have understood that there's a difference between the planning application. You see, when the SEA is done properly, there's no planning discussion about the need for it. They'd have to show the need for the pylons, why it's needed, what it's intended to achieve, and if they put in it's for wind energy, they'd have to have an SEA for the wind energy. They can't split it. You can't split it. If you don't foresee something that's coming up, you can do a modification, or if there's something unusual crops up, but you can't just split it up in sections. So they've had to do a full SEA for wind energy and for the cabling and the whole lot. And they'll have to do it on whatever they knew at the time. I can't say, and you can never say, that a court case will go any way. The Supreme Court might not rule that they didn't. They might say there is an SEA. How it could do that? I mean, I'd make an affidavit, I'd give evidence. When a lad like me that was watching it like a hawk was fooled by it, what would the ordinary person be fooled? That's the way it'd go, and that's what has to be done if the pylons were to be stopped. Now, sometimes in the case of like the pylons, you'll get a rich person living somewhere along, and that'd be a great help. But I'd say if they existed, they all give whatever they had to NEP. Now, could NEP be brought into it? It's up to the groups themselves, I won't say that. But you'd have to have somebody that was the heart in the right place, was keep their nerve. Someone has to be named in this as the plaintiff, and they have to have nerves of steel. The lawyers have to be competent, and there's only a few of them. And they're hard to get. You won't just walk in off the street and find them in a solicitor's office. So that's the story with it. It's not easy, but the pylons are a terrible thing. and they're going to be illegal for the rest of time. Isn't it something else that we vote for politicians, 5 TDs in Cavan, Monaghan, and this is in Monaghan, and there's 3 or 4 TDs in Meath, and not one of them will raise the issue of the illegality of the connectors and the wind farms. Is it amazing that that seminal, groundbreaking case was announced recently and there's nothing in the papers? We are living in a media propaganda machine and a government propaganda machine. And wouldn't you think if the local politicians were on our side, they'd mention that? But no. This undergrounding is only a ruse. It's in the regulation 347 that is for an overground line. And an overground line it is going to be. That's my twopence halfpenny worth. If I think of anything else, I'll make another video. They're long-winded, but I'm sure a few people will look at them. And that's the situation. The National Court, the High Court and then the Supreme Court would have to decide there was no proper SCA done. Make a fair attempt at that. And then it'll probably be referred to the EU to know if a planning permission is granted. What's the story? It's there already in that case. It has to be annulled. ANNULLED. If it was built, it still has to be annulled. But something tells me that you'd be a very old man before you get that pushed through. That's the law. And if anyone had the time and the money and the way of doing it, you could make a Derry Bryan wind farm. It's already declared illegal. Be brought down. The Irish government say, oh no, you're out of time. That got permission in 2004. They're paying 5 million of a fine recently and 15,000 a day. And you tell me that the European Court would back that up. If an application went into the Supreme Court and the European Court said, no, it has to be taken down, how would they get out of it? And it's the same with the pylons. How would they get out of it? It's a question of putting it in the right way. That's my twopence halfpenny worth. That's the great pity of it. Hopefully when they come along with the pylons elsewhere, the groups will have a different view. Because everywhere I went through the country to meetings and things, everyone would say to me, what kind of a crowd are you up there with that nip? And you'd feel embarrassed to blame me for nip. Because I live up here. I had no say in it. Such a tragedy. Idiots running something. They shouldn't be let in the door. But that's it. It's done. There's no point in me having a grievance about it. And as I say, I can fry the fish with the windmills. And that's a good enough environmental thing to be at. And I have so many groups that I'm helping. I was 3 hours this morning researching a wee bit of law for somebody that's hoping to take a judicial review on a wind farm. And do that and keep doing that. But it will be terrible to see those pylons. It will be shocking. It'll be shocking. And I can only do my best, and I've now done my best. Folks, it's 13 minutes. That's it. There's no doubt people want to speak to me. If people want to ring me, that's all right. And if they want to talk about who the lawyers are, we can discuss that too. For me to do it for a population of maybe 200, 300 affected people, there are about 30 who have good time for me, and I would love to be able to help them. But there's another 270 who think I'm an idiot. That's the way it is. And they think I'm a contrary old rascal because I don't lick. They're fucking old politicians. And that's all they are. Old scumbags are politicians. And I don't do that. I'm telling you the law. I'm sorry for using bad language. That's the law. That's it. And I've done that now. And it's up to people to digest it and use it any way they want to. Thank you very much. We'll see you back. I'm sorry for getting high about it. It is such a pity to see that environmental damage happening and all the law that you would ever dream about there to stop it. That's what happened. And when it was put to them, all they could do was order me out of their meeting. And only one spoke or raised it whatsoever. So that's the situation, folks. We'll see you back for something a bit more cheerful. And I'm actually very happy. I get the windmill stopped. That's all I really will make me happy. But I'd like to get the pylon stopped. We'll get other pylons stopped anyway. It's getting very hard on government. They're a crowd of rascals. They're breaking up there. Two Green, the young gay queer Greens and the young Greens pulled out of the Green Party there last week, and we're in the middle of all this lockdown, and there'll be a story to be told about that. Folks, give me a thumbs up for my efforts and a thumbs down. I've done my bit. I've explained it. If you can't get it, come back to me and I'll try and explain whatever else is to be done. I don't fear any man. I don't care whether anyone likes me or not. I studied hard to learn the bit I know. I know the Planning and Development Act. I know the SCA Directive, and I know the EIA Directive. When it comes to the Habitat Directive and the Machinery Directive, I don't know them. I do not know everything, and I do not take on to know everything. But I know those. And I was right from day one. And the European Court of Justice in the case C-24-19 has proven I was right all the time. And thank you very much, folks, and we'll see you back.